It's not every day that a CEO leaves Ontario to head up an Alberta company, nor is it every day that someone takes on $160 billion in assets to manage. But for Evan Siddall, the CEO of Alberta Investment Management Corporation, doing so is simply the next step in a long and illustrious career. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of C-Suite Unplugged, an Alberta Better podcast series. In this series, host Adam Legg talks to Alberta's top CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders about their journey to the C-suite, what keeps them up at night as an Albertan and as a leader in their industry, and what their outlook is for the future. And on today's episode, we speak with Evan about his journey out west, joining AIMCo during a tumultuous time in the company's history, and why equity, diversity, and inclusion are so important to him. We also hear from Evan about how he has approached his early onset Parkinson's diagnosis, the future of AIMCo, and his long-term view for Alberta. And if you found this episode interesting or insightful, let us know by heading over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and give us a quick review and a rating. Now, on to the show.
Welcome back to another Alberta Better podcast. This is our C-Suite Unplugged series. Today, we're going to talk about dollars. Managing a dollar isn't always easy, and our guest today is responsible for managing about 160 billion of them. He's an incredibly smart and driven leader who accepted a challenge to come to Alberta from Ontario to take the helm of an organization that was under the microscope and over the long term ensure the savings, pensions of thousands of Albertans would be there for the future. Today, we're lucky to be joined by the president and CEO of the Alberta Investment Management Corporation, also known as AIMCo, Evan Siddall. Evan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks. With that introduction, the worst thing you can say about somebody in Alberta is they're from Ontario. You've dug me a hole, Adam, from which I've got to recover.
Well, actually, it's a testament to your grit and determination that you've been willing to come from the center of the country to here in Alberta. So
where real work gets done. Yeah.
Exactly. Evan, folks know you're the president and CEO of AIMCo, but maybe just give us your elevator pitch on AIMCo and the role you play there.
Well, the role I play is kind of chief coach, right? As any leader should be. Our purpose at AIMCo is to help our clients build better financial futures for the Albertans that they serve. And what that means is we're trying to build financially secure futures through retirement funds, of course, but we also have a responsibility for the Heritage Fund. That's about $20 billion. And the current government has made it a priority to continue to invest in the province. And those are kind of sacred responsibilities, right? We're talking about being fiduciaries for people's money and for in many ways, the future of the province. So we take it seriously.
And you call yourself chief coach. Love that role definition. What does that look like amongst a group of people who are very smart investment managers and financial experts?
I think servant leadership is a real thing, and I believe in it. I think it was Ben Zander, the conductor, said he realized that the leader's the only person, or a conductor in an orchestra is the only person not making noise. And I think one has to, as a leader, think about leadership in that way. That your job is not to do stuff, ironically. It's to help clear the way so people can do their jobs better and give them air cover when they need it. And that's what I mean by being chief coach. That's my job.
A great way I've heard that articulated before is enabling people to do their finest work or supporting them in doing their finest work. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And that's a leadership philosophy that many members will have.
Yeah, exactly. Evan, part of this podcast series, people love to hear the story because I think people look at CEOs and think they're sort of mythical creatures and a rare breed. How would I ever get to that kind of role and that level of responsibility and business profile? Could you share with us your journey to the chair you sit in today? What was the journey from Evan finishing high school to where you are today leading AIMCo?
Yeah, I'll try to do this in less than 20 minutes. That was meant to be funny, Adam. Yeah, good. Well done. Yeah, I wanted to go to, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so I applied, I did an economics undergraduate degree, economics and business. And that was really just in a sense, a filler. I had an interest in economics, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I then decided I would do a joint law degree and MBA. Again, keeping my options open. Somebody, I think it was my father, gave me the advice, Evan, if all you do is keep your options open in life, you got to make a choice. So I thought I'd be a lawyer. And I spent my first year of the joint LLB MBA program being a law student at a firm then called Davies Ward & Beck. And that what I really wanted to do is be an investment banker. So at graduation of law school, I joined a firm then called Burns Friday. It became Nesbitt Burns after the Bank of Montreal bought it. And then I found my way to Goldman Sachs and Wall Street in New York. Just a bunch of circumstances. Balls kind of bounced my way. That was a really heady time, the late 90s, early 2000s. I went to Lazard after that, which is a boutique investment banking firm. And then 9/11 happened and found my way back to Toronto. Did work for, I decided I'd run my career through investment banking and wanted to return to the real world. And found myself actually in the oil and gas business, working for the Irvings in, of all places, New Brunswick, that oil and gas hotbed, which is really, of course, a downstream company. And I worked in the family holding company to try and find ways to diversify the family's investments away from oil and gas. And that ran its course. And I spent some time at the Bank of Canada. And the reason for that kind of relates to Goldman Sachs. So Goldman had this in the US, there's this idea of in and outers, people who spend time in the private sector and in the public sector. And I'd done well in investment banking. And some folks I knew had found their way to Ottawa. And so I thought I'd try my way and do that. So I went to the Bank of Canada for a bit. And then Jim Flaherty and some folks, actually Nigel Wright, who at that point was Stephen Harper, Prime Minister Stephen Harper's chief of staff, asked me to help fix CMHC because coming out of the financial crisis, housing was a significant problem. Flaherty saw that, so did the Prime Minister. And CMHC had grown rather too grand, as Flaherty famously said. And so we de-risked that company in a significant way. While it was not privatized, we effectively privatized a lot of risk, decreased CMHC's market share, reoriented the company towards more public policy oriented, its public policy mandate, which ended up being important when COVID happened because we were able to help the banks survive what was a difficult period of time by being ready to stand by and buy mortgages from them. But at the end of that time, which was about 2021, I started thinking about what I would do next. And I was interested in something that blended public and private sector roles. And so I actually was a candidate for a couple of jobs and happily ended up taking this one here at AIMCo. And this is the best job I've ever had in my entire career. I'm super happy to be here.
That's great. I largely credit because it's based in Alberta, but that's
of course, and that actually is important to me. That is important.
Yeah.
Because I found in Ottawa, and of course it's a bit of a texture of who's in government, but Alberta was not well represented in Ottawa. Mm-hmm. We know that well. And the voice wasn't being heard. And I think this place matters a lot. I think this country matters a lot. And I think Alberta matters a ton to this province. I think the energy intensity here matters a lot. And I think it's too easy for people in the East. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's too easy for people in the East to get on their high horses. That's probably exactly the appropriate term, because I guess they think we're all going to drive horses.
Yes, of course we do.
Into the future, which isn't to say that preparing for a transition economy is something people here aren't thinking about. We are. But a transitional economy is a net zero economy, not a gross zero economy. We'll still need hydrocarbons. We have to think about how we do that in a smart way. And we positioned AIMCo to be a much more thoughtful, I think, investor about what that means for the future.
Yeah. Evan, you talked about going from private sector, Goldman Sachs, Bank of Canada, CMHC. Was there anything that you wanted to be doing more in the public sector? How would you contrast the experiences of, Goldman Sachs, legendary firm, to Bank of Canada, very much a public institution, and CMHC also as well? I'd love to hear the parallels or differences between those very contrasting experiences.
Yeah, they are contrasting. I learned mostly at CMHC, we like to say bureaucrats are unmotivated people. I'll tell you, senior bureaucrats, and I know you know this, Adam, are really motivated, capable people.
They are. Yeah.
But in general, these people are not super well led and not imaginatively led. And that's a function of the crushing pressure of politics. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's a real thing. I discovered it frustratingly that government fails to assess the price, to value the price of inaction. Inaction is always a choice that they will take, and they think it's free, and it's just not free. And that manifests itself in a whole bunch of different ways. Decisions that need to be made don't get made. And that can harm the productivity of the economy. And I think we've seen it here in Canada.
Yeah. On the same topic of leadership, you completed Harvard Business School's President's Program in Leadership. I wonder if you could tell us about how that program has influenced your leadership philosophy today.
Look, Harvard's a great school. There are many, many, many great schools in the world, including several here in Canada. And I think the study of leadership for CEOs is important. I've spent a lot of time thinking about things I wouldn't think about. I remember the first time I heard somebody say they were a change management consultant. I thought, oh my God, shoot me now. But as a CEO, you spend so much time on HR and org behavior issues. It's actually super important to know how to motivate and inspire people is a meaningful thing for a leader to know. And I think I gained an appreciation for that. Starting at Goldman, because Goldman had a real training culture and a real leadership culture. My boss at Goldman, Rob Kaplan, actually ended up at HBS after he left and ran the Harvard Endowment during the financial crisis. And so part of my connection to Harvard is personal. It's through Rob. And he then went actually and ran the Dallas Fed for a while. He and our paths went in different directions. And I usually went to him for advice. I remember when he called me and said, should I be a central banker? You know something about the central banking stuff. Should I be a central banker? I said, gee, Rob, you're asking me for advice. Anyway, the Harvard thing or leadership training, because I don't want to make it about Harvard, understanding how people think and how structure matters a lot and how strategy and a coherent strategy consistently applied drives so much motivation in a company. It just sounds so simple, Adam, but people don't do it.
Yeah.
It's a little like a Jackson Pollock painting, right? This is one of these things where you just spray paint
splatters everywhere. Yeah.
And you look at it and go, man, I could do that. And I guess the answer is, well, you didn't. And that's what makes it important. That's what makes it important. So that simple stuff about leadership, I think matters. And I learned that there.
Yeah, no, that's I love that Jackson Pollock analogy. Evan, people love to hear about the routines of successful people. Do you have any daily routines or practices that in the day of a life of Evan, the CEO?
Yeah, my day is so varied. I travel too much. One of my ambitions used to be to lose my super elite status. I'm going to have to retire for that to happen. And part of that is because we've decided that we want to make AIMCo into a very much a global player.
Mm-hmm.
I want to walk the talk, but I have to walk the talk too and spend some time overseas. So if a normal day is here in Edmonton, it always starts with a bike ride. I call it cycle therapy. The place that I actually have my best ideas, such as they are, maybe my worst too, is just riding a bike, and the longer the better. I don't bike as much as I want to because I'm traveling too much. And then I will spend time in the office. I try to minimize the number of meetings I have that are group meetings and try to spend time with teams, just talking like this, Frank, and trying to hear them and answer them in an authentic way about what's concerning them. So, but the average day, let's say we have an executive committee meeting every week. I meet with my direct reports for an hour twice a month just to hear how they're doing, what's going on, what they're worried about. There's no typical day, I guess, Adam, is a real thing. It'd be a board meeting or other things. Yeah.
No, it's every day is a challenge.
Different thing. And I am such an impatient person. It suits my character well to not have a rote routine.
Boring would grate on the nerves, I'm sure. Evan, on a more personal note, you've been public about your diagnosis of early onset Parkinson's and co-founded Growling Beaver Brevet, and I think I'm saying that right, the largest single day fundraiser for Parkinson's in Canada. And I wonder if you could share with our listeners what you hope they take away from this conversation in terms of the disease and what they can do to support your efforts and efforts of finding a cure.
You're going to find this maybe weird and maybe even rehearsed, but it's not. So when you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, you're told you have Parkinson's. Good news, you don't have a brain tumor or MS, multiple sclerosis. It's not great news, right?
Yeah.
But something's wrong, and to hear that you have an answer and that it's not going to kill you, you can't die from Parkinson's, is actually kind of a relief. And unfortunately, some people take the diagnosis badly, and they're very self-conscious about their symptoms and become withdrawn. And it's tragic because it's unnecessary. It's just the stigmatization of illness, I guess. But I must say, Adam, this is so easy for me to say because I have access to great treatment and I have a very, frankly, mild version. My decay has been very slow. I have a very mild version of the disease. So it's made me actually grateful. Like, I think every day about the fact that tomorrow will be harder than today, and therefore I'm more grateful for today. And it hasn't helped my impatience. Therefore, I'm as impatient as ever. Now I have a really good reason to be impatient. But it's made me easier to live with. And that's actually true for a lot of people, that the disease humbles you. And I'm grateful for that too. So the fact that we've, with a bunch of friends, created this fundraiser it's kind of a selfish thing. That sounds odd, but it's a selfish thing because it means that I'm getting on top of this illness. It's not getting on top of me.
Yeah.
That's been part of the motivation for the ride.
Yeah. And if people want to learn more or help contribute, where
Growlandbeaver.ca. Growlandbeaver.ca. Parkinson Canada is doing some great work. There's new leadership there. A woman called Karen Lee heads Parkinson Canada. And with a few other people, we're helping her on her strategy and a few other things. She's a terrific leader. She thinks a lot about leadership too. And she's transformed that organization into something that has, we won't get a cure for Parkinson's. Michael J. Fox's foundation, if anybody, will find that cure. So it's remarkable what the MJ Fox Foundation has done. But what Parkinson Canada is doing to help people live with the disease and have a high quality of life it's remarkable. It's affecting hundreds of thousands of lives, and that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, I'm touched by it. My uncle, who I help take care of in Kelowna, has Parkinson's, and I know how much the Parkinson's Society helps him, supports and just counseling and all these sorts of things. And it's truly remarkable. As you say, they may not find the cure in any of our lifetimes, but there's so much support. And thank you for your work that you're doing to help raise funds.
Let me say this, and I mean this to everybody who's listening to this podcast. If you know anybody who's feeling shut in, who's not responding well to their condition, and that I can help, reach out to me. Nothing gives me more pleasure than to help somebody cope with this shitty situation. So that satisfies I get so much psychic income from doing that. It would be my honor. So we'll leave it there, but I'd be happy to do.
Well, thank you for that offer, Evan. We'll make sure anyone who gets in touch with Wayfind over to you. Evan, as we sort of close the personal reflection side, if someone were to come to you and say, I want to be the next you, I look up to you. What advice would you give to someone starting their career? Would you encourage them to do or even not do?
Oh, yeah. This is a harder thing to do than it sounds like, but think deeply about what you love to do, about what you want your day to look like, and find that job. Don't make it about, so easy for me to say, right? Because I'm well compensated, but don't make it about compensation. Don't make it about promotion. Make it about what you're great at or what you love doing, and whatever that thing is, that won't just satisfy you, it will make you excellent. And I actually think that's the key. Yeah.
We subscribe to this book for all our new hires here. It's called Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. That really a philosophy of just honing your craft, and you will grow in terms of responsibilities and
so true, huh?
And levels. Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. People on their jobs are always, when you do these reviews, and we do this a little differently at AIMCo, but you do annual reviews and you get what you're good at and what you're bad at, and everybody spends time on the constructive feedback because I just want to be better. And in fact, I think good leaders help people understand what their superpowers are and focus on and minimize those things in your job or in what you do that you're just not as strong at. I think it's important to know where your strengths are and really to focus on those. Yeah.
Build on your strengths. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Switching over to the AIMCo side of things, Evan, I know you took the helm, set in place a plan, a set of goals to get AIMCo performing the level you know it can and needs to be, and made a substantial progress. I wonder if you could just share with us what was the plan to shape and shift AIMCo under your leadership, and how's it going so far?
Yeah, well, the first plan was to make people, you want to inspire employees around what the mission of the place is and have a mission that makes sense. So we listened. I guess I listened. People give me credit for this, but really it's just an exercise in synthesis or integration. Our purpose, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, is that we help our clients build financial futures for the Albertans they serve. And that permeates all that we do. And the language is we help our clients. Our clients come first. Our strategy is to put our clients first. And everything we do has to be benchmarked against, are we doing the best for our clients? It's their money we're investing. It's their money we're spending. And where we have made mistakes in the past, we can talk about that if you want, we took our eye off that ball. So if we're always doing what's in best for our clients, we're doing the right thing. Secondly, we want to build a platform because we have many clients. We're unlike most of the other so-called Maple 8, the Case Depot, CPPIB, Ontario Teachers. CPP has more than one client, but OMERS, Teachers, HOOP, CPPIB, in a sense, have only one client. It's a very, very different business model. And as a result of that, we have to have an adaptable investment platform so our clients can come and invest through us in the way that they want to. And that involves a difference in how we think. It involves a difference in systems. So we're making a major overhaul of our systems, of our IT platform, in a way that is actually transforming. It's not an IT transformation. We're transforming our business through IT. It's IT enabled, not IT driven. And then finally, we're investing in talent and people and leadership, and just generally investing in the people that we have and bringing in terrific people who will add to that group. That's the strategy, basically. And that's the story and how we're transforming the place.
That's awesome. And where would you say you're at today? Are you sort of year what of what transformation?
Well, yeah, for year one was developing the strategy. So I've been here almost 2. Actually, I have been here 2. Yeah, I've been here 2 years. So we're in year one of probably what ends up being culturally a 10-year transformation, but functionally gets front end loaded. Like a lot of the hard work is being done over the next 2-3 years.
Yeah.
The payoff will occur over we're long-term investors. That's okay. Payoff will happen over a long period of time. And it shows up in different ways. I said that we put our clients first. Well, that means that instead of just seeking so-called alpha or risk-adjusted superior returns, it's not good enough here for us to say, oh, we just beat a benchmark. And if the market fell 5%, losing 4% is okay. We shouldn't be losing money. We should be making money all the time. And in a consistent way. That's a different way to invest. And it's taking seriously our responsibility to our clients.
Yeah. I know you took the helm when there were some underperformance. How was it working with your clients?
It was really
to work, get them to sort of generate that support and trust back in the organization.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, we're clearly on a path, but trust is built over a decade and lost in a day. And
so true.
Yeah. And so I bear them no ill will that we haven't fully rebuilt that trust. It's manifestly different. Like the quality of conversations is so much better. And the relationship is not it was like not just frosty, fully cold. Like it was Edmonton in February. Right? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's
real chilly.
And credit to them, they've given us the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Well, I know you sufficiently well to know that you've committed time and energy and attention to showing the proof points of earning back that trust, and I know you're only just getting started. So looking forward to seeing how that decade plays out.
Me too.
Evan, AIMCo has 9 investment beliefs as part of the over-investment philosophy, and wonder if you could speak to some of the ones that you think are most important, and ultimately where did they come from, and how you play them out every day in your investment decisions.
Oh yeah, we had long discussions about how what do we think about active management? What was our philosophy of investing? Where do we have real edge? The way those all emerged from a conversation among senior leaders in the investment division. And it was a real examination of how are we different? Strategy emerges from understanding what you should not do. And we had to think about it. In many ways, the place wanted to be all things to all people. That's people's natural instinct. But if you start with the premise that you can't be all things to all people, then you got to think about where you're going to differentiate yourself. And that's what those investment beliefs are all about. Those investment beliefs are meant to be an expression of how we invest differently. And it was an interesting conversation here. And it starts the fact that we're a multi-client, multi-asset manager. And that makes us different from a lot of people. In a funny way, and I don't mean this in a grandiose way, we are much more similar to BlackRock. I don't mean in scale, but in attitude. We invest with other people and a lot of other people. We're more like them and less like CPPIB. And we fall into this trap all the time of saying, oh, what do the Maple 8 do? That's really not the way I think we should think about AIMCo. I think we should think about AIMCo as we got a bunch of clients and you think differently about how we help them. And the investment beliefs are just part of that.
Well, when you talk to your peers in the Maple 8, as you said, many of them are single client asset managers. How much harder is it to have that many clients, and do some of those investment objectives create tension within the overall strategy for AIMCo?
They do. I'm not going to say it's harder, because I think it's hard to have one master too, who can really push you around a bit. And the relationships with some of my peers, if they're my peers, that's an open question, and their clients can be tough. there's an influence that's different. I think we need to make a virtue of the fact that we have multiple clients, and I think we can. And that tension, I think, Adam, makes us better at our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it makes us think differently.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's harder, but maybe, and I guess I'm positing that certainly it should make us a better investment organization.
Yeah. Evan, even prior to your arrival, I'd often hear people say that AIMCo should be a more deliberate supporter of domestic or Alberta-based companies. We should invest in the home team. You've faced that. You and I have chatted about this from time to time. How do you feel about that notion? Because you are a global investor, you want to be a global player. How do you respond to folks that say you should be investing more in Alberta to help support Alberta companies and grow the Alberta economy? I
think it depends who's saying that. And let me tell you what I mean. So of the $160 billion that we manage, about 75% of that is pension fund money, 75%. That money needs to be invested because our promise to them is get them the best investment opportunity we can find anywhere in the world. And I think it's a distraction and undermines our potential investment performance to say otherwise. However, and a big however, is $20 billion of that money is heritage fund money. And we take instructions from that particular client, the government of Alberta, and that's a decision for them. That is an endowment fund. It's a sovereign wealth fund, in effect, that could, it's up to the premier, really, how we conduct ourselves with respect to that. And, I'm going to defer to her decision on that. But so it's different, right?
Yeah, I think it's easy to armchair critique what AIMCo should and shouldn't be investing in, but I think people often don't put themselves in the shoes of the public employees who want to make sure their pension is there at the end of the day. And it's not a tool necessarily to be trying to spur economic development using real people's pension dollars.
Yeah, is that do we think the right social contract is that we invest in whatever on the backs of teachers, on the backs of civil servants, on the backs of police officers, on the backs of farmers who are counting on us to protect their crop insurance fund, right? Probably not, but the government can make a decision.
Yes, yeah, on the heritage fund side, yeah, exactly. That can create some flexibility for sure. Yeah.
It's easier for me to answer that question than any of the other maybe because they're all managing pension money.
Yeah, that's very true.
That's another virtue of AIMCo.
You've got that one piece of the pie that is not pension fund. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Last year, you wrote an op-ed in the Globe and Mail, put a link in the notes on the future of work, and you note that AIMCo, you're changing the manager-employee relationship, supporting a choice-first, results-only work environment.
And we're calling it Work Our Way. We're using it. Yeah.
And so share with us a little bit about that model, how it's working out in the day-to-day.
Yeah, I have this discussion with a lot of people. There are a lot of people in the financial services business, quite famously, who are just ordering people back to work. Our philosophy here is pretty simple. We're all adults and we should be measuring results in people's work and not FaceTime at the office, to put it simply. It has been remarkably powerful as a recruiting tool. We've recruited a bunch of great people. And interestingly, this tends to be of more value to working moms, to people from immigrant families who are supporting a larger family. They tend to be multi-generational and they have different pressures at home than the standard go to the office 9 to 5 would allow. And so it's enriched our company in ways that I hadn't fully anticipated. We haven't seen any fall in productivity. I think COVID helped that because we learned how to collaborate differently. There's still a view, and I challenge it because I don't know that there are data on this, but there's still a view that we collaborate better in person. I get that to a certain extent. Teams is a terrifically collaborative platform that we can use differently. The other wonderful thing about Teams is my office on Teams is the same size as everybody's in the companies. So it democratizes decision-making. And for us at AIMCo, we're a decision-making firm, right? That's what we do. And the fact that you break down barriers and you promote psychological safety among people who can speak up, I think will help us from a performance point of view. So look, it's still early days. We're trying to figure out ways to measure the impact of this. We don't have them. We are attending to a bunch of different measurements that we do have, like, of course, our performance, but importantly, employee engagement is as higher than it's ever been. And it keeps trending up. It keeps going up. And Krista Pell, our CHRO, and I keep saying to the board, this will come to an end. It can't keep, and it just keeps going, just keeps going up. So I know that if you have engaged employees, they're more productive. And so it's an experiment, admittedly, but it's been good for AIMCo, and it's worked for us.
I know one of the things that I've often reflected on as we look at more of a remote work environment is are some of the younger employees losing out on some of that traditional face time with senior leaders, mentorship, coaching, development. I know you can still do some of that on Teams, but I can remember as a young guy just popping into the partner's office or whatever it might be, just having a chat. Are you seeing any impact, pro or negative, on culture, mentorship, coaching, development at all?
I don't think we've measured that properly. So I'm not sure I can give you an empirically reliable answer. But I'll say this. People here call other people on Teams. It's the same as popping into somebody's office. From a pure communication point of view. Yeah, body language matters. Yes, relationships are built better in person. That's all true. It's not that we don't get together, right? It's not that we never come into the office. It's that we said to teams, you talk amongst yourselves and you decide what your own protocol is. And they decide for themselves how much time they have to spend in the office and when. It's not that we say never come in at all. And then when we get everybody together in the company, it's a big, big thing. And we really spend an effort on promoting collaboration and building relationships when folks are together. I want to declare victory, but most of that is hunch stuff. And I'm too data driven to rely on a hunch.
Right. Yeah. No, fair point. Evan, you've been a strong advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion in your career, and being named a Catalyst Honors Champion in 2021 for being a role model for inclusive leadership. Your chief investment officer went as far as saying that you walk the walk with DEI in a way that I've rarely seen any leader. What is your personal approach to diversity, equity, inclusion, and how have you brought that into your leadership approach at AIMCo?
We're a decision-making organization. Investments are kind of widgets for us. And in order to make good decisions, you've got to make sure you're looking at it from every angle. And so that means making sure that every voice can be heard and every objection can be respected. And so you do that through making everybody feel welcome. I think that's the measure of inclusiveness. And because, as a white male, if I see everybody's welcome, then I know the place is working. And we spent a lot of time as an executive committee and with individual teams working on what's called psychological safety. And that's making it safe. That's making it safe for people to express themselves in an honest way and not feel judged for their position, their skin color, their gender, their whatever, It's just investing in all of that. I think there's much more work to do, actually. And there probably always will be. But there's two reasons to do this. One is it's just like manifestly the right thing to do, but it's also productive economically. In terms of what we do, it should make us better decision makers and should result in better decisions.
Psychological safety, is that something have you seen more or less of that in your career, in the sense of typically environments either don't have that, or what really brought that to the fore from your leadership perspective?
Well, that goes back to Harvard. So I spent some time at Harvard with a woman called Amy Edmonston. She's written a lot of work on this and the effectiveness of teams. And I guess it dates back to Goldman, where we thought about leading teams and how you do that effectively. But I thought Amy's views on this made sense. And so we've worked with a company called August that Amy endorsed to me. And we change how we make, so the way we make decisions at executive committee, if there's any controversies, we have deliberate ways and a process we follow that elicits every voice in a structured way, so that not only can the decision maker be advised, but also people know and feel like they had an opportunity to share what they want to say. And I'm happy to share those methodologies. August is a terrific company, but I'm happy to share those methodologies with anybody who wants.
That's great. Is it an intentional
Oh yeah.
going around the table type approach, or is there something more
Yeah, we do something called
deeper than that?
We do something called rounds.
Mm.
I mean, I could go into detail, but basically it's just going around the table. That's part of the model. You need to structure a way to make it safe and normal for everybody to contribute. And I'll give you another example. If somebody objects to the proposal, so I propose we want to do X. If somebody objects, the next question is it safe to try? Because if it's safe to try, you should still give it a try. So that's a version of psychological safety. You try stuff, and it's okay to fail.
Yeah. You got to give yourself the ability to try and experiment,
as long as it's safe. As I used to say, my son and I have this rule: safety third, fun first, friends second, safety third. It still counts, but it's not the most important thing.
goes against all those engineers. Safety first. Yeah, no doubt. I think pushing on sort of the investment landscape, saying that the past couple of years have been interesting and tumultuous times in markets has been an understatement. From an asset management perspective, Evan, what are some of the key things that AIMCo is looking at these days? It could be anything from certain sectors or fields. There's lots being made about artificial intelligence, machine learning.
Yeah.
We had another interest rate overnight hike a couple of days ago. Cyclicality. What's sort of top of mind that you're filtering these days in decision making?
Yeah, well, one of the things we're trying to do is make sure we are a more globally present investor. So we've opened offices in that international hotbed of Calgary. We've expanded in London. We've expanded in Toronto. We've also opened in New York. We haven't had that official opening, and we're opening in Singapore later this year. That'll be enough. And that still represents fewer offices than any of our so-called peers. So what we're doing in a measured way and in a smaller way than most of them, but because we can. That's one thing. And the reason to do that is just to generate the best opportunities in the world. The other reason to do that is that investing has become so affected by geopolitics that if we don't have, some kind of intelligence and view on the way the world is going, what's going to happen in China, for example, on climate change and policy, on all these things, then our clients will suffer. In terms of where we're emphasizing, we're shifting more towards illiquid investments because our particular characteristics lend itself better to illiquid investments. It's where our investment edge has most power as opposed to public markets. And we're talking to our clients about all that. We have expanded significantly what we're doing in private debt because we just have an opportunity right now. It used to be in private debt that you'd get kind of a double B credit for 6%. We can now get senior secured credit for 12. So it's moving up the capital stack. Clients see the logic of that and have reallocated money towards private debt. Infrastructure has proved to be a really effective inflation hedge. And of course, we care about that for the benefit in particular of our pension clients, but also the Heritage Fund. And I guess the last thing I'd mention is this issue of climate change. And, we have two views on that. One is the idea that you would divest of fossil fuels is short-sighted because it represents a short on human ingenuity. It represents an abandonment of the people who have the most to gain, the most to lose through this. And so not just because we're Albertan, but certainly partly that's true. We look at it differently. There will be money to be made as carbon gets priced into decisions we make. And a long-term investor can position it well to make money for its clients, and we're doing that. Now we're doing that indirectly through some fund investments, as opposed to directly through AIMCo. But those are some of the themes that are pretty relevant right now.
Yeah. Well, here on the fossil fuel position, I think that's something that we know many others around the world are very short-sighted in that perspective, and we applaud your views on that as well. What's your outlook in terms of, obviously we just saw another little uptick in the overnight rate. You spent time at the Bank of Canada.
Yeah.
Where do you see rates going over the next 12, 18 months or so?
I actually think the central banks are getting close to where they want to be. They're just focused on inflation and price stability, right? We need to make sure we understand what central banks are meant to do and designed to do. They're not trying to price economic growth. There's been an existential debate in the US about whether growth should be part of the mandate of the central bank, and it's confusing. And so they worry about, in the Eurozone, core inflation is at like 6 or 7%. It's quite high. happily, it's not quite that high here. But I think central banks are getting to the point now where, okay, they've walked rates up. They'll see how this works. And hopefully they haven't choked everything off. I would have been thinking that we're facing a recession. I'm not sure I feel the same way about that now, but I'm not yet prepared to revise my view, which was that we would so-called policy error is better if we have a mild recession than if we don't choke off inflation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because stagflation, low growth, high inflation is the only thing worse than that is actually a full-on like depression. Yeah. And I don't think we'll be there. But the bill's coming due on a bunch of post-financial crisis monetary policy, which was meant to avoid a crisis and did. And that's where we are. And it's going to be a really tough investment market for a while. I think we'll make money. We'll make absolute returns, but they won't be stratospheric. We're just going to have to be very, very, very careful and choosy about what we do. And thankfully now, with a more international network and better relationships with fund managers, we should be able to do that in a more cost-effective way and generate some, no home runs, some singles and doubles, and that'll be just fine. If we don't, it's strikeouts we need to avoid, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you're consistently getting on base, that's a good strategy, right?
That's the strategy. Yep.
Yeah. Are there any things where your spidey senses go off these days in the investment circles? The most well-known of late to the GameStop phenomenon, but is there anything out there that you think is overhyped, overblown that people should?
That's one. Crypto was one for a while. I have a pretty simple view. If I don't understand it, I'm not going to buy it. Yeah, crypto was one. I don't think there's anything. I think there are a lot of bubbles out there right now. In many ways, I think the stock market is more enthusiastic than the rest of the world, and I don't fully understand it. That's the kind of thing that always looks clear in the rearview mirror than out the front windshield. Yeah, I'm not fussed about any bubbles in particular. No, interest rates are a funny thing because high interest rates are actually reduce the liabilities of our clients too, right? So it's a thing.
Yeah. There's some tension in that.
Tension in both sides.
Dynamic. Yeah, exactly.
It's a really hard. It's a hard investment market for two reasons, right? On the one hand, we have high inflation, so the hurdle rate's higher. But the world's also repriced risk. The world had basically eliminated risk premia for many assets, and in hindsight, that looks dumb. We're seeing deglobalization and supply chain effects being inflationary and changing the economy, and for both those reasons, it's harder to invest. But I think that helps justify why we need an AIMCo, because we can pool a bunch of different things and increase Albertans' leverage in the world of investing. That's really what we do.
Yeah, I love your point on the repricing of risk. There was just, for so many years with low interest rates, there was just so much, use the Greenspan term, irrational exuberance, and not enough people, too many people saying, what could possibly go wrong here, and we've seen that play out in a few different scenarios. Evan, as technology becomes more and more an aspect of decision making, whether it is machine learning, artificial intelligence, focus on climate, geopolitics, do you see institutional investment changing? In any material ways, and how so?
Yeah, I'll talk about AI and machine learning. This is the world of investing, but frankly, it's probably every industry. This is a today problem. Like, it's not tomorrow, it's not next year, it's a today problem. And we think about that in terms of, what exists in our business that machines could do, and therefore cheaper for our clients. That's a question everybody should be asking. And the world of investing is going to change for the same reason. Now, I don't think there's going to be much advantage in it, because the innovation people will pick it up and do the same thing, and then markets will adjust. That's what markets do. But boy, if you're not keeping track of it, as my undergraduate investment teacher said to me, if you don't know who the fool in the market is, you're the fool in the market. It's a good line. And AI is one of those things right now. One of the reasons we're embarking on this tech business transformation is so that we can understand better where we can apply AI. Because here's the other problem. If you're not applying it to places where you have investment edge, you're probably just wasting money. And so we've got to be deliberate about, because you spend a lot of money in this area.
No.
Yeah. So that's, frankly, we have the economy of scale to do that as a big investor. And it's a today problem.
No doubt.
Yep.
We're at the last question here, Evan, and it's sort of a bigger picture one about Alberta. What's your long-term view for Alberta? Are you excited, concerned? What do you think we need to do to make sure we're on the right path for the long-term prosperity of Albertans?
Yeah, I think of it, I hope this is the right way to say it. I think about this as a Canadian first, Albertan second. Like, Canada so needs Alberta. And I've said this to you privately, Adam. I think we're too shy. Doesn't sound very Albertan, but we're shy in parts of the world where we should flex our muscles more, parts of this country, in Toronto, in Montreal, in Ottawa. I think people are more receptive to hearing from Albertans, especially on this climate change stuff, than we've led ourselves to believe. I've had my views on transition and on divestment, the one I mentioned to you earlier, applauded. Of course, some people object to that, but we just got to be realistic. I spent some time on Minister Savage's climate panel. She's developing a climate strategy. And, the approach of, we got to prepare for transition finance. We got to prepare for climate transition, but, we've got to do this in a responsible way and be realistic about it. Yeah. Being realistic about it means that fossil fuels, abated, all that stuff, have a future. And we should spend some time on carbon sinks so that we recognize the fact that we're going to continue to use fossil fuels, sustainable aviation fuel, things like that. And let's make sure this is a just transition, and we don't do it on the back of workers, on the back of First Nations, So it was really well conceived. I'm not sure where that sits right now, but I think Canada needs Alberta, and I think Canada knows it more than we think.
Well, that's a great positive message to end on. Evan, thank you for that note of optimism, for your belief in Alberta and Albertans and the ingenuity that we have innate within us. And it's clear Poe's got a bright future under your leadership. So thank you for joining us with this conversation.
Thanks for what you do for the Business Council, by the way. It's important to have this voice expressed in the province and in Ottawa.
Thank you, Evan. Appreciate your support of us for sure.
You bet.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of C-Suite Unplugged, an Alberta Better podcast series. This podcast is a production of the Business Council of Alberta. You can learn more about us at businesscouncilab.com, and we'd love to connect with you on social media. So give us a follow at BizCouncilAB on Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. If you liked this episode and want to support our message of shared prosperity for all, please be sure to head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts to subscribe, rate the show, and give us a quick review. New episodes drop every other Tuesday. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.